Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be talking about a pretty unique place in the United States, in the world for that matter, in terms of nasty weather. Sometimes we think we have the worst weather here in Syracuse and central New York, but we're going to talk to a gentleman that is in a spot that I guess kind of claims that they have the worst weather in the world. And so for this segment, we are going to bring in Mike Cameron. He's the Summit Weather Operations Manager from Mount Washington. So, Mike, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today.
I've got a lot of questions on my sheet here, but, kind of start out and just kind of give us some particulars about Mount Washington and get yourself into what makes the mountain so unique in terms of its weather.
Absolutely. Mount Washington is, we like to say it's world renowned for its weather. Just because, for a number of reasons. For one, we're actually a relatively small mountain. If you think about it on a global scale, our summit's at 6,288 feet. When you compare that to, some of the higher mountains out in the Rockies out west, over 14,000 feet. And of course, over into the Himalayas where you're up over approaching 29,000 with Mount Everest, 6,000 feet doesn't seem all that high. But yet we observe regularly weather on top of Mount Washington that rivals some of the tallest mountains in the world. A lot of that has to do with where we are in New England. New England is, of course, sort of known for some interesting weather. You place a mountain like Mount Washington in the middle of that, and regularly we see winds gusting, over hurricane force, over 100 miles per hour, in particular in the wintertime. Our year-round average temperature is below freezing. So for much of the year, we are experiencing icing conditions and frozen precipitation as well. And then, of course, all that, the combination of all those things, leads to things like regular whiteout conditions, heavy blowing snow, very cold temperatures. We have the record for the coldest temperature in the state of New Hampshire at 47 degrees below zero. And so all that sort of adds up to this mountain that's also shrouded in the fog quite frequently, about 60% of the time. So it gives Mount Washington sort of this very foreboding presence, if you will, up here in New England.
So tell me, you mentioned the hurricane force winds. How often does that happen? Does that happen every week, a couple of times a week? What's the average for a hurricane force gust up there on top of the mountain?
Yeah, the average for us, and we like to talk about our winter season for these things, just because, well, our winter season is particularly long by standards, but usually in the winter we'll see on average a gust over hurricane force every other day is the average, and then usually every 3 days we're gusting over 100 miles per hour.
So what do you consider your winter season? So I'm going to back you off there a little bit. When you say winter season, what months do you consider that the winter season?
Yeah, really from a meteorological, but also from an operational standpoint, which for me is a particular interest as an operations manager. Really, I consider our winter to be October to May. Obviously, it varies from season to season, depending on how quickly, the winter machine, if you will, turns on, how quickly we get that first snowfall. But effectively, when we're planning operations and transportation, we got to be ready to go for winter in October. And if we're lucky, we'll get a little bit of alleviation from that by say mid-May or so. So there's really only a couple months out of the year where we're not really thinking or talking about snow.
Yeah. And since we're talking about wind, Mount Washington for many years had the record for the strongest wind, I guess, the wind gust in the world. Tell me about when that occurred and how strong the wind was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, back in April of 1934, actually, is when this wind gust occurred, which was less than 2 years actually after the observatory was founded. So we like to say we were founded just in the nick of time, because yeah, in April 12th, 1934, we recorded a wind gust of 231 miles per hour
Wow.
on the summit of Mount Washington. With hard to imagine, just less than a 3 hour drive north of Boston, we recorded a 231 mile per hour wind gust, but that did happen, and that was a world record. Like you mentioned, it's held as a world record until 1996. So for over 60 years, we did have that claim to fame. And yeah, the stories, being an employee of the observatory, the stories about that particular event are pretty extraordinary, as we did have human observers in a chained down wooden shack, essentially, which is what the old observatory looked like,
So it's not the
experiencing those winds
observatory
in person.
it's not the observatory that's up there now.
No, we made some improvements since then, that's for sure. We're now in a steel reinforced concrete building, so we can rest a little bit easier when we get those high winds.
Yeah, but I mean, the specs for that building must be incredible because I mean, you've got to, your top wind could be 230 miles per hour. So that must have been built specially for that. And as kind of a follow up, I mean, if there's damage, I mean, how often does that occur during the winter that you have to make repairs or fix up the observatory?
Yeah, we do see some regular damage and just some weathering. Luckily, we are above tree line on Mount Washington, so we don't have to worry about a ton of debris flying around or anything like that. And that's just how the mountain has sort of evolved over time because of the extreme nature of the weather. But we can see some damage just weathering over time. Luckily, the observatory is housed in a Mount Washington State Park building. And so they're really the landlords, if you will. So they're really responsible for a lot of the repairs and things like that. But we still, obviously, being tenants up there ourselves, we're regularly checking out the integrity of the building, both inside and outside. We're fending off nature at every turn. Essentially, we get leaks in the building somewhat regularly. We get a lot of ice buildup. We can get some damage, to the windows, although we do have bulletproof glass in most of our windows because of the nature of the large chunks of ice that are flying around at 100 miles per hour.
Yeah, that can do some damage. Obviously, wind and snow get the big headlines for weather up there. But what are some of the I don't know if it's necessarily unusual, but what other things do you see up there weather-wise that people down in lower elevations might not see and not be able to appreciate?
Yeah, probably two that come to mind for me. One is just the amount of fog that we see. We're in the fog, as I mentioned before, about 60% of the year. So a lot of the times, visibility is poor, not just because of blowing snow, but because of that fog. And so, working on Mount Washington and living on Mount Washington, you kind of have to get used to being in the fog very often. So that's something that can be, obviously, when it's below freezing, it can deposit ice. It can also be very disorienting if you are out in that fog. The other thing I like to mention too is, which a lot of people don't necessarily think about, which is my passion, is thunderstorms. We do see a good amount of thunderstorms in and around Mount Washington in the summer months, and because of how exposed we are, particularly dangerous above tree line for lightning danger in the summertime. So that can catch a lot of people off guard, I think, that aren't necessarily thinking thunderstorms when they think Mount Washington.
Yeah. I follow you on X, or the observatory on X, and what I think is one of the cooler things that you see on top of a mountain like that is the undercast. It's the valley is in clouds and socked in, but you see the top of the cloud from your vantage point there on the mountain. That must be very cool.
Undercasts have to be, yeah, some of my favorite views, and one of those things that it's very difficult to. I mean, the only other time you'll really see something like that is if you're on an airplane. But there's something special, I think about being above the clouds. In particular, there are those instances where Mount Washington is the only mountain peak sticking up from around the clouds. So, on a normal day, you see the nearby mountains, but when you have that undercast set up just right, it looks like you're sort of floating on an island with nothing else around for hundreds of miles except that fluffy cloud layer below you. So I think those have to be some of my favorite moments. You can really feel like you're on another world up there.
We're talking with Mike Cameron. He's the Summit Weather Operations Manager at Mount Washington, and we've been talking about the weather on top of Mount Washington. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll talk about what it's like to visit Mount Washington, because it's, at least out of those winter months, it's a very accessible place. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Mike, if you could stick around with us.
Sounds great.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Jim Teske, and for this episode of Teske's Tidbits, we are talking about some extreme weather on Mount Washington, and we have Mike Carmen. He's the Summit Weather Operations Manager there, and for this part, we're going to talk about outside of the winter months, when people can visit the mountain. First off, there's a number of ways to get to the top of the mountain. Most notably is by car, because even here in central New York, every once in a while you see people with a bumper sticker that says that this car has gone to Mount Washington. So talk about the different ways that you can get to Mount Washington.
Yeah, there's a number of ways to visit us on the summit. So you mentioned the driving up your car. So our partners at the Mount Washington Auto Road maintain the road. So you can drive your car. It's a 7.5 about mile drive to the summit. Takes about half an hour. There's no guardrails, and there are some steep cliffs on either side. If you're not down for driving it yourself, they do run stagecoaches as well, so you can have someone else do the driving for you, and you can just be along for the ride and enjoy the view. You also can come up on the Cog Railway as well, the Mount Washington Cog Railway, which leaves from the other side of the mountain. And they run trains, multiple times per day. So you can take a train up and enjoy the view that way from a different side of the mountain, get a different perspective there. But of course, if you're a purist and you want to really experience the mountain from base to summit, there's a number of hiking trails in and around Mount Washington, so you can get up on your own 2 feet if you're up for it.
Okay. And when you get there and you're lucky enough that it's not foggy on top of the mountain, how far can you see? I mean, can you see into Canada? I mean, what's the visibility like there on a clear day?
Yeah, our maximum visibility on the clearest of days is you can see 130 miles as the crow flies. So that allows you to see, over into as far away into the Adirondacks in New York State. We can see Whiteface Mountain from the top of Mount Washington. You can also see over into the Green Mountains of Vermont. You can see up into Canada as well. And of course, on a clear morning, if you look off to the southeast, when the sun hits the ocean just right, you can see the Portland area and the ocean just offshore of that. That's really special when you get a glimpse of this sort of orangish glow from the sun reflecting off the ocean just right.
So the road up there is open before sunrise, correct?
So they generally open after sunrise, but they do have some sunrise. They do open for sunrise a few days throughout the summer. So you can drive up your car on those designated times and get up in the dark, and then watch the sunrise over Mount Washington.
Okay, so I mean, seeing the view obviously is the big attraction, but what else can people take in when they're there at the observatory?
Yeah, it's a good question. Since we are in the fog so much, a lot of times, on the summit, there's not too much to see because of the fog. But the Sherman Adams State Park building has a number of different things you can check out inside. There's a museum that the observatory owns and operates. So you can learn a little bit more about the history of the observatory and the work that we do. There's a number of gift shops as well. So you can get your souvenirs and your bumper stickers from our gift shop, as well as the state parks too. And then there's also the observatory does run tours of the weather station. So if you're interested to learn more specifically about the work of the Mount Washington Observatory, the observers, the history, the weather, you can actually take a peek inside the weather station. And if the weather's just right, you can get to the top of our instrumentation tower and check out the view from up there, check out our wind instruments, and learn a little bit more about how we maintain things in the winter season.
Now you're in an alpine zone, I would assume, at that elevation. Are visitors allowed to walk around outside, or is it too fragile for people to be out there walking?
There are some walking trails on and around the summit, some designated walking areas, so you can get sort of a 360 view walk all the way around. So some walking and some hiking trails, but it's definitely something to pay attention to because just adjacent to those trails are a lot of those fragile alpine plants and sedge grass that we really try and kind of maintain awareness about the fragility of that. And how important it is to maintain. But a lot of those areas are pretty well marked, so something to pay attention to. But there's plenty of areas to walk around if you are visiting the summit.
And how should people prepare, dress when they come to the top of the mountain? If they're in the lower elevations, it might be in the 80-degree range, but I guess you got to prepare for much different weather sometimes at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's usually somewhere between 20 to 30 degrees colder on top of Mount Washington than in the valleys. You can also on the observatory's website, we have our current summit conditions page constantly running, so you can see what the weather conditions are at any time on Mount Washington. So if you are planning to come up by car or hiking or whatever, great to check out that page so you know what to prepare for, both wind and temperature wise, because we do get a lot of folks that show up that aren't quite prepared for Mount Washington's weather, even in the summer when it can get chilly. So that's definitely a good thing to check out before you head on up.
Let's talk a little bit about your job and what it's like to actually work there. You're there right now. Well, I mean, what drew you to this position as operation manager there at the observatory?
Yeah, no, my job is very interesting. I'll give you that unique. I actually started as a summit intern right out of college. I have a background in meteorology, and knowing about Mount Washington and learning about it in my meteorology classes naturally. When I saw an internship opportunity, I jumped on it and was lucky enough to get it. And then I graduated basically to a full observer position and was a mountaintop weather observer for almost 10 years. And then this role sort of opened itself up, and my role now is basically managing the team that works and lives on top of Mount Washington. So I'm based out of our Valley office, but I'm up on the summit sort of as needed. Making sure things are operating smoothly, basically making sure the weather observers and interns have what they need to keep the weather station running. And then, of course, there's always the chance that we'll have illnesses or something like that, and I have to jump up there and kind of dust off my observer hat and basically fill in for observers as needed. So it's an all-encompassing job, that's for sure. That and because we're a 24/7, 365-day operation, it's one of those things where I could get a call any time of day, any time of the year, and I just got to be prepared for it.
So we know during the summer, the warmer season, you could take the road up. What do you do during the winter? How do you get up and down from the mountain?
Yeah, wintertime transportation is a process. Our main form of transportation in the winter is a snow tractor. So it's much like what you'd see at ski resorts, grooming the slopes. But we have a special one, custom made. It has a passenger cab on the back of it. And so we can fit, up to 12 people total, including an operator in that cat. And so we take that up the snow-covered auto road in the wintertime up and down. Generally speaking, average travel time one way is about an hour and a half. The machine doesn't move very fast, and usually there's some snow to plow, that sort of thing.
Visibility problems.
Yeah, so when you get visibility issues with blowing snow, high winds, sometimes it's really slow going. I think the longest trip I've been in the back of the Cat for one way is about 6 hours, where you're just sort of inching along, waiting for that next rock to reveal itself, waiting for that little glimpse of visibility so you can move a couple inches and just kind of slowly make your way up or down. And yeah, that's just part of the deal, part of the fun, if you will, about the commute.
You're up there for extended periods of time, obviously, especially during the winter time. What's the longest you've been up on top of the mountain?
Yeah, the longest I've been, so our shifts are generally 8 days. So Wednesday to Wednesday is normal, but occasionally you can get stuck because of weather. The snowcat can't get up. That does happen a couple times a year. So the longest I've been up there for is almost 2 weeks, I think about 13 days. So I was scheduled to come down on a Wednesday, didn't end up getting down until, say, the following Sunday or Monday, I think it was, just because of weather. The cat tried to get up day after day, wasn't able to make it because of bad visibility, heavy drifting, that sort of thing. So again, that's one of those things where it's part of the job, and you just got to be prepared and pack a few extra sets of clothes just in case that happens.
Yeah. In a sense, I guess it's when you're those extended stays, it's kind of like being on the International Space Station, except you've got gravity where you are.
That's basically it. And it's not only are you up there a few extra days, but you also have to keep things running as well. It's not like you can stay up there and just wait for the cat. You still have a lot to do, a lot to maintain, and usually the weather's poor, so it's extra fun in that case. But hopefully you get a good storm, a good wind gust out of it to kind of keep your adrenaline going.
What's your favorite part of the job?
Oh, there's so many good ones. I mean, my favorite part of the job, I think, just has to be the weather. I mean, experiencing the weather. I mean, there's so much that we're doing to sort of guard against and beat the weather back, if you will, in maintenance. But then sometimes, it's great where you can just sort of be out there in high winds, or sometimes in very low winds and calm conditions, and just sort of enjoy the nature of where you are and kind of take it all in. So I think for me, at the end of the day, it's always important to get outside and remember where I am and why it's so special.
That brings me to an interesting point. I was going to ask, were you in the path of totality for the eclipse a couple of years ago?
Not quite. We were very close. The southern sort of fringe of the path of totality was just to the north of Mount Washington. So I was actually off the summit, and I was able to see totality. I had to travel a little bit north, but from what I hear, it was still a pretty special experience from the summit.
Okay. And as we kind of wrap things up, there's you've got a number of people on your staff that work there, but you have a special member of your staff, a feline member of the staff. Let our viewers know about that.
Yeah, no, he's our probably our most famous staff member, that's for sure. We have a history of having cats at the observatory. Our current resident cat his name is Nimbus. He's been with us for a few years now, and he's the only staff member. We like to say he's the only staff member that never leaves the summit. It's not entirely true because he does have to come down a couple times a year for some vet checkups, make sure he's healthy. But most of the year he is on the summit. The observers, we all take turns taking care of him, making sure he's well taken care of, well fed. And he does go outside mostly in the summertime. He knows what door to go out. He knows where to come back to come in. And sometimes he'll be out all day, all night. just kind of stretching his legs and doing what he does, doing what cats do outside. So, but it is nice because it adds a little bit of hominess to the environment, since the observers and we're living up there for chunks of time. So it is nice to kind of to have a pet to kind of add to that coziness of the experience.
Yeah, so I guess if you're up there looking for the view, and you stop by, you might see Nimbus the cat as well if you're visiting. So we've been talking to Mike Harmon. He's the Summit Weather Operations Manager at Mount Washington. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's fascinating to hear about the weather patterns there on Mount Washington. I hope things don't get too bad the rest of the winter for you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And while we hope it's not too bad, part of us also hope it is bad because, hey, we wouldn't mind breaking another record.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim.
Download the WSYR Plus app on your TV to stream News Channel 9 for free. Just go to your smart TV, search WSYR Plus in the App Store, and download to start streaming today.